talk about. In the first half hour of the show, our guest will be a prominent economist, Dr. Robert Shapiro, who discussed the state of the economy that Joe Biden will inherit next week, and also talk about some of the key players on the Biden economic team. In the second half hour, we're going to talk about the chaos and fallout from last week's failed coup attempt. Our guest on the provocative progressive political panel will be Kimberly Clark, the publisher of Demlist, and progressive activist Mark Grimaldi. So hang on, we'll be back after the news break.
With their followers while appearing on Fox Not News?
Apple, Amazon, Google, they have just destroyed what was likely, Parler is likely $1 billion company. Poof, it's gone. But it's more than just the financial aspect to that. Republicans have no way to communicate. I have 3 million followers on Parler. Tonight, I will no longer be able to communicate with those people.
Again, Congressman, you said that on Fox News. Don't tell us you have no way to communicate. Major corporations have also started distancing themselves. Both Marriott, the world's largest hotel chain, and health insurer Blue Cross Blue Shield have suspended their donations to lawmakers who voted against the counting of Biden's electoral votes. The anti-Trump Lincoln Project has promised to target companies that donate to any lawmakers who voted against the counting of the Electoral College votes. And Trump now can't even sell merchandise on his campaign website. Stripe, the vendor that handles online credit card payments, announced that it will no longer handle his account. And on Sunday night, the PGA, Professional Golfers Association of America Board of Directors, took the 2022 PGA Championship away from Trump Bedminster, his New Jersey club, and we know that stings. And now this, Cumulus Media, which produces some of the most popular right-wing talk shows on the radio, has told its on-air personalities, including Mark Levin, to stop suggesting that the election was stolen from Trump or face termination. Should be interesting. In the aftermath of the attempted coup, we're now learning what happened and what was planned in bits and pieces. We came perilously close to seeing our elected members of Congress taken hostage or worse. The rioters breached the Senate chamber at 2:16 p.m. Wednesday afternoon, just 1 minute after the senators were hurried out to safety. And if not for one Capitol police officer, a black man named Eugene Goodman, who, armed only with a nightstick, lured the insurgents in the wrong direction away from the Senate chamber in order to give the senators the time they needed to escape with their lives. But the Capitol Police were so unprepared, and now we're learning why. Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund said he was worried about the size of the January 6th Trump protest crowd 2 days earlier and asked for the D.C. National Guard to be put on standby. But he was turned down by the House and Senate sergeants at arms. Sund then resigned. So now Donald Trump is facing the very real possibility of becoming the first and only president ever to be impeached twice. Since there are only a few short days left in his presidency, impeachment proceedings could stretch into the Biden administration. Nancy Pelosi, noting that the president is, quote, an imminent threat to our Constitution and our democracy, announced on Sunday night that the House would, on Monday, begin proceedings on a resolution by Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland, calling on Vice President Mike Pence to mobilize the cabinet to activate the 25th Amendment within 24 hours. Pelosi saying that if Pence doesn't act, the House would proceed toward a vote on at least one article of impeachment. Officials are now planning for the possibility of more violence leading up to next Wednesday's inauguration. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser called for Homeland Security to impose heightened security measures beginning Monday, today, instead of January 19th. Bowser's plea came as security experts warned that far-right extremists were discussing more assaults on Inauguration Day. One person posted in an online group dedicated to a Million Militia March on January 20th, quote, "We took the building once, we can take it again." And oh, yeah, we're still in the midst of a global pandemic, and the numbers are right now the worst they've ever been. The countdown clock to Joe Biden's inauguration stands at 9 days, 2 hours, 28 minutes, and 3 seconds. I got good news. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
The Leslie Marshall Show, a true democracy in talk radio. Of, for, and by you, the people.
Live from our nation's capital, it's Deadline DC with Brad Bannon.
Welcome to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. I'm Brad Bannon. I'm a Democratic strategist, a columnist for The Hill in Washington, D.C., and a political commentator for news radio stations KNX in Los Angeles and WGN in Chicago. My company, Bannon Communications Research, polls for progressive issue groups, labor unions, and Democrats. BannonCR.com is the sponsor of today's show. If you want to learn more about me and my political polling company, or if you have any ideas or suggestions for Deadline DC, the best way to reach me is on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @BradBannon, all one word. Our guest in the first half hour today is Dr. Robert Shapiro, an economist who's here to discuss the state of the economy that Joe Biden will inherit in 9 days and tell us a little bit about the Biden economic team. In our second half hour, we will, as usual, have our provocative progressive political panel. Our guests on the panel today are Kimberly Scott, the publisher of Demlist, and progressive political activist Mark Grimaldi. Our first guest today is Dr. Robert Shapiro, who is chairman of Sonecon, an economic advisory firm, and he's a senior fellow at the McDonough School of Business at Georgetown University. He's also an internationally renowned economist who joins us today to discuss the state of the economy. Dr. Shapiro, welcome to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Brad.
Let's start with this. Let's talk about if you could give our audience an indication of the kind of the status of the economy that Joe Biden is going to inherit 9 days. Last Friday, we had some, I thought, disturbing economic news where jobless claims had risen for the first time since April. What's your take on the economy?
Well, they did rise for the first time since April, but since April until the most recent report, the gains had been slowly declining. So this is not entirely a surprise. Look, the economy is in part hostage to the pandemic. And the pandemic worsened in the fall, and we're now seeing the result of that. That is, the worsening caused more shutdowns, and that caused more joblessness. Beyond that, consumer confidence, people don't have confidence in the near term of the economy, neither businesses nor consumers. And that means that their purchases and their investments are dampened. Finally, beyond these what we would call cyclical factors, that is this, but in this case, it's the cycle of the pandemic. The economy has been structurally weakened by the pandemic, which is to say, we've lost tens of thousands of businesses. And when as the pandemic improves and more of the economy can reopen in a reasonable way, whether that's in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, there are going to be fewer businesses there. And so the economy is structurally weakened. On top of that, we have a new factor, which is not shown up yet in any of the data, and that is the impact of the insurrection on confidence both at home and abroad. The fact is, the United States has been a magnet for foreign investment for decades. And the reason is that the United States has been seen as the most stable political and economic order in the world. We are losing that status. That's also underpins the value of the dollar. Everyone wants to hold dollars because they believe that investments in the United States are secure and that the rule of law, which reaches, of course, to contracts, which is central to business, that the rule of law pervades. And it no longer does. And we have to expect there to be consequences for the dollar and for foreign direct investment, all of which will put additional constraints on our ability to recover as the pandemic recedes.
I'm curious, corporate America, some at least elements of corporate America have responded to last week's failed coup attempt. We heard in the news feed that Blue Cross Blue Shield and other companies have said they're not going to donate, make campaign contributions to senators who challenged and representatives, politicians in general, who challenged Joe Biden's electoral college victory. Has the wave of disgust with the events of last week, have they registered in corporate America? This is not just a liberal interest group thing, is it?
No, and let's call it out for what it is. This is not simply because they supported the challenges to the electoral votes that have been certified by every state and by many courts. It's because they perpetuated a big lie which has been used to mobilize extremists to attack the government of the United States. They are guilty of the big lie. And it seems to me that that's why we have a kind of emerging policy of ostracism emerging right now from some sectors, for politicians who have promoted the big lie. And it is the big lie which is the driving force behind the insurrection. And the increasing, and on social media, the ostracism of Donald Trump for being the perpetrator of the big lie. How that develops that will depend in part on how the Republican Party responds. Are they willing, in effect, to repent in order to be forgiven? Repentance has to precede forgiveness. Will they stop portraying themselves as victims when in fact they've been the perpetrators? And of course, what's the next stage of the insurrection? Anyone who believes that this is over is not really familiar with the history of these kinds of insurrectionary movements. And we have to expect more incidents. They may shift from Washington, as more and more, as we militarize the geography of the federal government by placing troops around the Congress and around the White House, which appears to be the direction we're headed, it may shift to states. All of this is very negative for the economy.
Okay. Okay. Our guest in this half hour is Dr. Robert Shapiro, an internationally known economist who's briefing us on the state of the economy, which Joe Biden will inherit. We're also going to talk after the break about the actions that Joe Biden may take to reinvigorate the economy. We're going to go to break in a few seconds, but I want to tell you that if you're listening to us, we're going to go to break for a few minutes. For our radio listeners, you can now watch us and see what we talk about during the commercial breaks by going to one of these links. You can watch the show on periscope.tv/Brad Bannon. You can watch the show on Facebook Live at tinyurl.com/BB Facebook Live. And now, for the first time, you can also watch us on YouTube. And the YouTube address is tinyurl.com/Brad Bannon YouTube. So if you're listening on the radio and you're wondering what we talk about on the breaks, you can now see us. We'll be back after these messages with more with Dr. Robert Shapiro.
If you're worried your friend may be struggling, remember, you don't have to be there to be there.
Okay. Our guest in this half hour is Dr. Robert Shapiro, an internationally known economist who has advised many prominent Democratic public officials. He's here to talk about the status of the economy and Joe Biden's plans. Rob, before we talk about Biden economic policy, could you tell our listeners and viewers a little more about the people who'll be calling the economic shots? We have a new Treasury Secretary. We have a new chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. Why don't you tell us a little bit about these people?
Well, he's put together a very fine economic team. At the top of it is Janet Yellen. Janet Yellen is one of the most brilliant economists in America. I know she was one of my teachers, and with remarkably deep experience in government. She was chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Clinton at a time when I was the Undersecretary of Commerce, and we traveled to Asia together twice on fact-finding trips. She was the president of the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank. She was chairman of the Federal Reserve Board. And beyond that, she is a brilliant economist, and not a theoretical economist, a very practical economist, who also happens to be married to George Akerlof, who is a Nobel laureate in economic science.
Well, that's a power couple, isn't it?
That is a power couple. Cecilia Rouse at the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors is also a brilliant economist from Princeton. She's joined by Jake Bernstein, who is an old hand in Washington and was a chief economic advisor to Vice President Biden, as was Professor Rouse. You know, it'll be quite a change because right now there is no Council of Economic Advisors. There are 3 positions and they're all vacant. Two of them have been vacant for 2 years, literally. And the other was an acting person, Professor Goodspeed, who resigned over the president's attempt to overthrow the Constitution. We will be going from a government without any economic advisors to one that has world-class economists already appointed, and there will be more world-class economists who will be appointed to the Commerce Department and the Treasury and the State Department and the Labor Department.
Okay, we're going to return now to our radio listeners. Our guest in this half hour is Dr. Robert Shapiro, who runs an economic consulting firm called Sonecon. Okay. Welcome back to our radio listeners. In this half hour, our guest is Dr. Robert Shapiro, an internationally known economist who's just mentioned it was Undersecretary of Commerce during Bill Clinton's presidency. He's here to talk about the economy, Joe Biden's plans for the economy. Dr. Shapiro, I read last week that and I very interested in your comments about this, that Joe Biden sees the economy as a two-stage action. I get the impression in the early days of his presidency, he's going to focus on efforts to fight the pandemic, which, as you said in the first segment, is a big part of revitalizing the economy. He also plans on a relief package, which includes an added stimulus payment to the $600 that's already been approved by Congress, and also aid to state and local governments. And then later on in the spring, introduce a more comprehensive economic package to bring back the nation. How does that sound to you?
Well, I think it's the kind of stimulus the economy needs right now. Whether or not President Biden will be able to get it through the Senate, we'll have to see. We probably can package the COVID relief as part of reconciliation, which is a procedure in the Senate in which cannot be filibustered, where you only need 50 votes plus the vice president's. I think we would get support from some Republicans, but not enough probably to overcome a filibuster if this were not packaged in reconciliation. If I were him, I would also package the infrastructure package in reconciliation. Infrastructure has what economists call a high multiplier. That means for each dollar that you spend on it, the economy grows by a lot more than $1, probably by between $2 and $3, because you generate jobs and those people spend their earnings, and that generates more jobs, and because it generates business sales and consequently business investment. So I think that's, if I were advising him, and I don't advise him, though I do talk to people around him, I would urge him to include the infrastructure package with COVID as part of reconciliation, in order to be sure we get it through Congress.
I think we're probably going to hear a lot about this reconciliation in the coming weeks. Now, let me ask you about that, because I think it's going to come up a lot. Reconciliation, basically, the advantage is they can pass it with 51 votes and not have to worry about a filibuster. It has to be budgetary or monetary related, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It has to involve spending.
Okay. And can only be used once, or is that not true?
No, you can do it once in each session.
Okay.
And so he gets another shot at it next year.
Okay.
And there is also the question of, I think this will probably be something addressed in the second next year, the following year's reconciliation package, and that is taxes, tax reforms. Let's not forget that the Trump tax cuts were passed as part of reconciliation, or we wouldn't have gotten them. The Biden tax reforms will almost certainly require the same.
Okay. Let me ask you this. There's been a lot of talk about President-elect Biden and a infrastructure plan to jumpstart the economy. I always thought one of the advantages of electing Joe Biden, and correct me if I'm wrong here, when the Obama administration adopted a stimulus package early in the Obama administration to respond to the Wall Street crisis. Joe Biden was the president's point person for running this program, wasn't he? And I always thought that would be a great advantage in the present circumstances.
Yes, well, certainly his relationships with members of Congress. But the fact is, the Republican Party right now is very badly split. And it will depend, their willingness to cooperate will depend on how they navigate the split within the party. This is particularly true for the Senate. You know, in the House, we have a majority and you can't filibuster in the House. So what we need will pass the House. But in the Senate, I don't believe that abolishing the filibuster would succeed today. And I think we should abolish it myself, but I don't think that you could get 50 votes to do so.
No, I think Joe Manchin of West Virginia has already said he would vote against abolishing this filibuster.
And I don't think he'd be the only one in the end. I think there'd be several others. So we can't do that. And that means it depends on how Mitch McConnell, what he believes, what steps he believes will make it most likely for the Republicans to be successful in the 2022 midterm elections for the Senate. But let me tell you, you know, I had the opportunity to watch President Clinton operate at very close range. And President Clinton was a brilliant strategist, is a brilliant strategist, who could figure out, well, if I take step one, that will force Newt Gingrich, who was his nemesis then, to take step two. Then I take step three, he takes step four, and then I've got him. He's got to come and compromise and give me what I want. We have to think that way with respect to, we have to find people who can think that way with respect to Mitch McConnell.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they say about good NFL coaches. They're not thinking about the play they're watching. They're thinking about the play that's going to, you know, the two and three plays down the line. Dr. Shapiro, I want to thank you very much for joining us today on Deadline DC. It's always a pleasure to have you on to talk about the economy, and I'm sure we'll be speaking to you again early in the stages of Joe Biden's presidency. But thanks for joining us today.
Anytime, Brad.
We'll be back with more of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon and a provocative progressive political panel to discuss last week's Capitol coup and also the new impeachment initiative against the president. We'll be back right after these messages.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box?
Okay.
Can I touch this?
Thank you.
Where does sand come from? Is this tree good for climbing? What happens if I mix these two things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep in the attic? What's this thing called? Can I ride my bike backwards?
Like I said, kids are curious. It's up to us to keep them safe. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and catch the bus.
Hey, Brad.
Text and miss your stop.
Rob's still on.
I got him. I took care of
Text
it.
and be
Okay.
late to work.
All right, I'm going to call Kim now.
Text and work.
Okay.
Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi. Oh, hey.
Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive.
Hey, Kim.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org.
Good.
A public service announcement brought to you by the National
Everything
Highway
sounding
Traffic
good on
Safety
this end. Everything
Administration
sounding
and
good
the
for
Ad
you?
Council.
Yep.
Oh,
Awesome.
Good. Yep.
Perfect. Okay,
What's
let's
wrong
go.
with
Okay,
this?
we're all
Has
set.
the
I'm
savagery
excited.
and raw animal
Gonna get
hatred
us-
within the
me
human
too. I'm gonna
species
get us all set
finally
up
come
on
out
the
of the
live
darkness to
stream.
devour our society?
It looks good.
Fanatics in MAGA caps, rabidly cheering a tyrannical,
Sure,
lying,
radio
insane
is
president.
good.
Gangs of Proud Boys beating
All
protesters.
right, and let me give
whose
you both the
politics they
commercial
dislike.
feed. We are
Wackadoodle
coming out of
extremists
break
promoting the group
in
hallucination that
a
Nancy
minute and
Pelosi
30
is leading a
seconds.
fiendish Democratic
Brad, are you
cabal
doing a
of
monologue,
child
Brad?
sex traffickers. But is that really
Yes,
who we
I'm
are?
Like
gonna do
usual?
my
Given
short
the media and
monologue.
political focus on all things
Then I'm
awful
going to
about
ask
people,
Kim
you would think
to
so.
describe her
But consider a
experiences
couple
in
of
the
little
Capitol.
discussed truths about humanity that might help all of us step back from hopelessness and push ahead in our political work with a
Okay,
fresh
perfect.
perspective on what is possible.
All right, here is
Warning,
the feedback.
these truths are so contrary to present-day conventional thinking of what is possible that when some people are first exposed, their brains whiplash. So brace yourself. Here goes. Truth number one. Most people are fundamentally fair-minded, kind, and generous. Truth number two. The basic human instinct is not dog-eat-dog selfishness, but social cooperation and sharing. You might holler in disbelief, how can such happy truths jibe with that litany of horrors we're experiencing? Well, although there are obvious exceptions to the rule, decades of behavioral studies have by and large produced the same finding. The great majority of people are guided in their daily actions and relations by deep values of fairness and sharing. This is Jim Hightower saying, it turns out that humankind is, well, overwhelmingly kind. That's the deep, promising virtue that we should highlight, making people's innate desire for an equitable, cooperative society the basis for every one of our economic, political, and social policies.
If you missed Leslie on TV this week, catch up at lesliemarshallshow.com.
LDI. Welcome, panel. How are you doing today? We're going to start with Kim Scott. Kim was at the Capitol last Wednesday during the failed coup attempt, and I think it's fair to call it that. Kim, why don't you start off just by describing what you saw and heard at the Capitol Wednesday?
Well, obviously, the assault on Wednesday was unprecedented in its nature. It's not on the U.S. Capitol, but on our democracy. I am based just a few blocks from the Capitol, and so went down there myself to witness firsthand the chaos, and that it was. I was on the west side of the Capitol. The majority of what happened, the violence, I was on the east side. The violence was, for the most part, on the west side. But what I witnessed from the east side was something out of a movie after a bomb. There were hundreds of protesters who clung to the side of the Capitol. They had advanced up the steps. It looked like they had total control. There was someone they're waving a Trump flag and a Confederate flag. They were wandering around, some taking pictures, some tweeting, some with bullhorns, talking about Congress robbing them of this office. Mike Pence, as you all may have seen, there were many of the rioters that at one point were calling to hang Mike Pence for refusing to block Biden's electoral college victory confirmation. It was nothing I've ever experienced before. And of course, as we know, ended up not only dozens injured, but 5 people dead.
Yeah, Kim, what were you thinking while you were watching? What were you thinking and feeling while you were watching this scene of devastation on Wednesday at the Capitol?
I just, what I've thought most days under the Trump administration is, how can it get worse? Literally, if you look at just the last 2 weeks, the developments, Georgia, where we were robbed of our celebration there, but the calls to the Secretary of State, outright coercion. It is what has always been rule under a mobster. And we are also certainly testing every single limit of our Constitution, of our democracy, of politics. It's very sad commentary. And for me, where I see that building every day, to me, that means far more than the White House will or any other building. And I actually, when I did leave, I was tearing up. Just the thought of the destruction to that building that means so much and symbolizes so much for so many Americans.
Yeah, it's I don't even know how to. I was so depressed while I was watching it. Actually, Mark and I were on the air on Leslie's show Wednesday while this was going on. And, we were talking about it, and I just utterly shocked that this could happen in the United States of America. And I think, this is going, the tragedy of last Wednesday is just not going to automatically disappear when Joe Biden is inaugurated in 9 days. I think this is going to be a lingering sore on the nation that is probably going to be remembered for a long time in American history because it's such a symbolic breach of our democracy.
In American history, it's the only second time it's ever happened.
Yeah, since 1814 when the British invaded. Yeah, it's certainly a sad commentary. Mark, what were you thinking and feeling while we were on the air describing what was happening?
As it was happening, Kim obviously, and those who were there, I think, saw it up close and personal and kind of realized probably faster than those of us just reading it. It didn't quite fully form. There weren't videos yet as to how deep the protesters were going. We saw the reports of injuries, and then you did see, reports of what was breached and photos started coming out. But until you see some of the video, it seemed almost surreal because the words just don't do it justice of how destructive and dangerous it was, and still is. And I want to use the present tense because within the last hour, an FBI bulletin has come out warning of plans for armed protests at all 50 state capitals and in Washington ahead of the Biden inauguration. So it's still very much a present danger, a clear and present danger. So I hope that for those who weren't taking it seriously, they use this as an opportunity to do so. And additionally, I want to bring up the good work of two men, one who passed away, Officer Sicknick, who lost his life in the insurrection, doing his job to protect the lawmakers who were inside the building. In addition, he was one of the 5 who died. And also Eugene Goodman, an officer who, if you haven't read about him yet, I would Google his name. You'll see a lot of coverage now, thankfully, about what a hero he is. Just to give a brief synopsis, basically, he's it was all by himself, and they're an angry mob that had gotten inside the Capitol is chasing him up this flight of stairs, and at first you don't really realize what happens, but as they come up the stairs, they could have either gone right or left to the mob, and he just lightly pushes the lead person of the mob, and he goes to the left and draws them away, and we find out that these open doors to the right were where the senators were. So you can imagine how much worse things could have been if they would have gone the other way. So he is also a hero in all of this, and for many breakdowns in the Capitol Police, this officer, who is an Iraq War veteran, did an amazing job and is a hero. And I think that's what we also have to remember throughout this. There are people who are doing their job right now. They did certify the election later in that evening. They are introducing articles of impeachment today, and we will respond to this as Americans. Those of us who do so appropriately need to bring others along with us, and we need to lift up those voices and, tell those who are not taking it seriously why they need to do so.
Okay, we are in the middle of our weekly provocative progressive political panel. Our guests on the panel today are Kimberly Scott, who is the publisher of Demlist, and also the editor of the daily blog, Dem Daily, which covers the Democratic Party, policy, and politics. If you want to sign up, you can go and to the site. The Twitter handle is the Demlist. We'll be back in a couple of minutes for our radio listeners. For you, those of you who are watching us on Periscope TV or Facebook
America,
Live,
your children have an amazing superpower. They can help save lives by not having play dates. That's right.
Sorry, Brad, we ran into our break there, but we are clear now.
Okay. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. We are in the middle of our provocative progressive political panel. Today's panelists are Kimberly Scott, who is the publisher of Demlist and the editor of Dem Daily. Kim's based right near the Capitol, and she had the opportunity to observe the tragic events of last week. Also on the panel is progressive political activist Mark Grimaldi. We're going to resume our discussion now. Let's start with this, and I think this is a very interesting topic. Today, the House Democrats filed an impeachment resolution against Donald Trump for encouraging last week's insurrection. Now, I think, if you keep track of social media, there are certainly a lot of demands for impeachment. And there are some people saying, though, this man's going to be out of office in 9 days. So why go to the time and trouble of fighting for impeachment when the man's on his way out anyway? So let's talk about it. I think personally there are good reasons to impeach Donald Trump for what happened last week and what's happened during his entire presidency. Is this just a symbolic move, though, with Donald Trump leaving in 9 days? Kim, what do you think?
No, it is not a symbolic move. And it's a delicate dance. There's three options right now. One is that Trump resigns, which of course there have been numerous calls throughout the country and the world for that. One, that he is forced out of office under the 25th Amendment. And then the third is impeachment and then conviction by the U.S. Senate. We don't think that he's going to resign, knowing the president, which has some positives in the sense that if he resigned, then Pence would ascend to the presidency and for whatever few days would actually have the option of then pardoning Trump. We don't think that would happen, but nevertheless, it takes that option off the table. With the 25th Amendment, which was 25th Amendment of the Constitution, which was originally designed in case a president fell ill, then the vice
arranged, as in Trump's case.
Yes. The vice president and the cabinet determined that he is unfit for office and then strip him of the powers of the presidency. There's also been calls for that, obviously, as well. The advantage is that he would be out of office at that point, which would certainly be a positive for Joe Biden, who is looking at what is probably more likely the third option that would extend into his presidency, and that is impeachment. Now, this morning, there were actually two resolutions introduced. One was calling for the vice president and the cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment. It did not pass unanimous consent in a divided Congress, as we expected. And so that will actually go to a vote before the floor tomorrow, basically setting up an ultimatum, led by Nancy Pelosi, to Vice President Pence to get back in within 24 hours as to his answer about the 25th. Barring that, in addition, at the same time, a article of impeachment, incitement of insurrection, was also put forth in a resolution. That is expected probably to come to a vote before the House on Wednesday. If the House impeaches Trump, which there is time prior to inauguration, then it goes to the Senate. The House has sole power to impeach, but the U.S. Senate is responsible for trial and conviction from that point on. Important differences: in the House, it's just a majority to impeach. In the Senate, it takes 2/3.
Okay. I guess my question is, let's say the House does vote to impeach the president for the second time. That gives the Senate very little time. First of all, I don't think there are 67 votes in the Senate to remove the president. And my guess is the Senate may not even, have the chance to take it up before Joe Biden becomes president. So is it important for the House to vote for impeachment anyway, to make a statement, even though it's not likely to actually remove President Trump from office?
Yes. I mean, Trump lit the fuse for what happened.
We're going to have to go to break now.
No, we're back.
We'll be back with more.
We're back already.
DC and our guests, Kimberly Scott and Mark Amaldi.
Brad, we're good. We're back already.
Okay.
Yes, and that is the thing, is that for every single day that Donald Trump is in office, it is a danger to the American people and to our country. And that's why this call for action after such blatant, I want to call it treason against our country, in igniting and commanding, daring thousands of supporters, saying he was going to be with them, which he did not, to go to the Capitol and show those Republicans the kind of leadership that we need to capture our country back. So the impeachment is important on a number of different levels. The question is, what happens after that? So McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, circulated a memo over the weekend saying that they would not be able to, unless all 100 senators voted to agree to come back in, that they would not be taking up any matters until the 19th, which is the day before inaugural. But that Senate, the new Senate, can take this up after Biden is inaugurated. And some people like
Can you remove someone from office who's already removed from office?
They're talking about completing the conviction, and most importantly, and this is what I think people ultimately want, is once the Senate convicts, they can immediately propose a motion that only requires a majority to forever remove and Trump from holding federal office ever again.
Okay. Mark, you want to weigh in on this impeachment question? Is it worth it to pursue, even though we have 9 days left in Donald Trump's presidency?
Yes. I think you have to do everything within your power, whether it succeeds or not, to remove the threat to our democracy. Because if not, your constituents are counting on you. And if you let them down, then you have, I think, a whole nother issue of them not feeling like they're being represented. Now, do I think that they're going to go and storm the Capitol about it? No, I don't believe that would happen. But it creates a big problem, because then they feel like on the other side are people who are causing an insurrection, and on this side we have lawmakers who won't uphold their part of the bargain and protect us. So if Republicans choose to slow things down or not vote to remove President Trump, then I think you let them have that on their conscience and on their record, and you show that you did the right thing and you are trying to protect the country, and also punish this man for his actions, because they definitely deserve to be punished. 5 people lost their lives, like I said, including a Capitol police officer, and it's not easy. It's not hard to see how this could have been a lot worse. And I think if this action goes unpunished, and there's not a strong response to it, it actually invites more violence from those who are planning these potential other attacks, like it said in the FBI bulletin, at all 50 state capitals and at the inauguration. So I think you need to come back in the hardest terms possible under the law and do so for those reasons that I just laid out. And I think it could be, and this is not hyperbole, it could be a matter of life and death as you go forward. And clearly it warrants impeachment under the terms of what does and what does not. So I don't think it's much of a question. I understand there's political strategy involved, and with what we do, I'm not deaf to that. I think that is important, because you want the future administration to succeed with all the challenges we face between this insurrection, the pandemic, the economy, like we talked about in the first half hour. Politics is important and it does matter. But in this case, I think doing the right thing also may work out politically. And whether or not it does, I think this is one of those instances you throw politics in the rearview mirror and you say, I'm doing what's right for the country.
Okay. Let's start with a new topic in the few minutes we have left. Kim, you're covering the Biden inaugural for Dem Daily. And because of the pandemic, we're going to have an inaugural that is going to be a lot different from past inaugurals. Can you tell us, our viewers and listeners, what the Biden inaugural is going to be like?
Yes, we should say first that Dim List, as with in past inaugurals and convention, host a public calendar where anybody can go to it, www.dimlist.com, and view what official events and unofficial events are ongoing. We expect to get over 100 events on the calendar by the time we get to inaugural. A lot of them being posted now because it's virtual. People are planning later. But I would say at least half the states are doing celebrations. The Presidential Inaugural Committee, which has an unbelievable task on their hands, is planning most of the events. There will still be official ceremonies under the Constitution. Joe Biden is sworn in at noon on the 20th. Kamala Harris will be 15 minutes before. There will be a pass and review, which is review of the troops. There will be a few other things that are traditionally part of the ceremony. But the big thing to watch for is really the virtual parade, which will be very similar to the convention's Roll Across America, which was a great production. It's being put together by veterans who have also done Super Bowl halftime and other major events like that. And it was enormously successful during the convention. And so there will be some balls that are going on at the same time. And we invite, again, everybody to check daily on the calendar. But there will be reason and an opportunity for us to celebrate together and to actually include the faces of America. Part of Biden's commitment, both in his campaign, his administration, that his administration, his efforts will reflect the face and the diversity of America.
Yeah, and today the Biden campaign or inaugural committee announced that the theme of the inauguration will be America United, which is certainly appropriate, especially after the events of the last week. You know, I should say that, you know, while I was watching last week's tragedy at the Capitol, I was, you know, depressed, and I've barely been able to watch any of the news coverage of the riot because I find it so depressing. You know, despite my youthful appearance, I've been in this business a long time. And you know, this is not what I signed up for. I think Donald Trump has made an abomination of his presidency and scarred this nation irreparably, and I just depresses me and, you know, makes me wonder what I'm doing in this business sometimes. But anyway, that's it for today. I want to thank our guest, economist Dr. Robert Shapiro, Kim Scott of Demlist, and progressive activist Mark Grimaldi.
Thanks, Brad.
I'm here Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. If the Lord is willing, the creek don't rise, and if Trump doesn't declare martial law on his way out the door. Brad Bannon, stay strong, stay safe, stay sane if you can while the pandemic rages and Trump is still in the White House. I'll be back next Monday, same bat time, same bat channel, and make sure you listen to my very good friend Leslie Marshall tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern. Thank you all. I'll be back with you next week.
Thanks.